Only want what you can't have.
Radford Real Talk, welcome.
Never seem to be satisfied till it all goes bad.
If you've been rocking with us for a little bit, y'all know how we do.
Maybe I should just
We
give
always start with the
someone
warm-up.
else a chance.
Ease into it.
Why should I sit alone and be sad while you fumble the best you ever had?
Sit with
It's not
it.
fair to me or my heart. I was forced to start over
Feel
when
it.
we fell apart. Could have had it all, but you pushed me right
Just
into
breathe.
his arms. You wanted to break.
Just breathe.
I wanted to stay.
Let's get our minds right.
Look what you made.
Hearts and ears open.
me give my love away. You made
What's
a
going on,
mistake.
y'all? And welcome to Radford Real Talk. We are just so excited to have you here today with us. And I have to just say thank you to all of my listeners that are out there supporting me. You know, words just can't express how thankful that I am to have so many people in my corner and you know, with their hearts open, ears open, and minds open to receive, you know, the things that I have to say, you know, and I just want to say thank you and just continue to put it out there. There's so much negative going on in the world. You know, that's why I don't even like to watch the news, which I really don't. But we need inspiration. We need love. We need knowledge. We need wisdom. And, you know, that is the purpose of this Rad for Real Talk. You know, we're learning something, we're healing. And it's so much healing that needs to be done in this world right now because it's just crazy. Just drama and chaos. And, you know, it's just time. We need some peace. We need some peace and we need to get it from somewhere. And I'm hoping that this podcast has been a sense of peace for you. I want to shout out everybody, you know, in all over who's been listening. I had to shout out my hometown. You know, I'm originally from Chesapeake, Virginia. Shout out to Chesapeake, Virginia Beach, all the 7 cities, Norfolk, Hampton. Everybody's been listening. Even other countries have been tuning in. And I just want to say thank you to Belgium, Portugal, the Netherlands, Australia. Just thank you, and just continue to put this word out here about those things that we talk about. Today, actually, is something near and dear to my heart. This topic, we're going to be talking about addiction today, and I call this session "You Can't Judge a Book." You know, because you never know what a person has been through. You never know who's called to help you. And you just never know. And so many of us judge people based on, you know, when they're in their valley moments. And it's unfair. You know, we all have something that we deal with, struggle with. And a lot of things are based on, you know, the lack of knowledge. And today I wanted to talk about addiction because this thing is real, y'all. It is serious. It is people that are out here dying every day from drugs and alcohol. It's just a true epidemic right now. And I know that, you know, one of my purposes is to help bring healing to all those different populations as well. And this is near and dear to my heart because, you know, it's not only in, you know, our families, but also, you know, my husband is a recovering alcoholic and addict. And, we know, shout out to him for, you know, practicing his sobriety and working his program and helping others. Got to give him those props right there. And you know what? Throughout being in the mud, and those are something that we're going to talk about with him when he comes on for the next session. Because today is going to be the information session where I educate you on what addiction is so you can have a better understanding and awareness versus, you know, going along with the stigma and judging. So, you know, I've been there in the mud, you know, with him. And, you know, people really need to see the other side of it, and not point a finger and not judge, and I've been there to see the suffering that happen when a person does want to get it right, and something is just wrong because it's not clicking. So we're going to learn about why today. Um, so, first of all, it's very important to understand how common this thing is. This, when I say this thing, addiction. And so in 2022, the United States National Survey on Drug Use and Health, they reported us 46.8 million Americans that battled with substance use disorder in 2022 alone. And that doesn't even include, those who have not received treatment or have not been to a hospital, or those may have passed away and we just didn't know about what happened or why. That doesn't include those numbers. Those are just those that are reported. um and then in so between 2019 and 2022, COVID really, man, that really caused a lot of uh, escalated issues, um, actually created new issues, and then also increased those that may have already been there. And 2019 to 2022, there was, and these are just those reported, right? 107,941 overdose deaths. And, we just really, I don't think people really understand the seriousness of this thing, or we hear it, but we really don't know. You know, some of us may have been impacted by this in some type of way. And there's a reason, y'all, why during COVID, when the world was shut down, ABC stores stayed open. There is a reason why. And because people will be dying left and right, um, from alcohol withdrawals, which is one of the most dangerous detoxing processes that a person can go through. So I do believe it was two things: not only just the death rate and hospital rate of those who will be suffering as a result of that, but also it's a money thing. Let's just be real and call it how we see it, which is all I know how to do. That's why we call this Rad for Real Talk. So what I want to do is actually kind of educate you all on the what addiction is. And remember, it's not just substances. Yes, it's drugs, it's alcohol, but also it's, behaviors, gambling, sex. There's so many different types of addictions that exist. And, I want you to learn and understand what the actual definition is, because it will kind of help bring clarity, because a lot of us don't know. So let's talk. What is addiction? So according to the American Society of Addiction Medicine, it is considered a treatable chronic medical disease that involves the circuits of the brain, genetics, the person's environment, and the person's life experience. Okay. So the highlightable part about that is it's a disease, a medical disease, right? So a lot of us don't see it that way. I've never thought about it that way. So although it's also a chronic medical disease, it's also classified as a mental illness. Why is that? Because addiction affects how a person thinks, it affects what a person feels, and it affects a person's actions, how they behave. This thing warps the brain, which is why things aren't as easy as what we think they will be. So it's really important to kind of know, what the brain, what it is. And this is the thing that got me into the field of psychology, counseling, substance abuse, is because I always wondered why people do some of the things they do. That got me in the field. And then when I began to learn about, or I went through what I went through with my husband, and seeing, other people in my family and stuff like that may have struggled and struggled silently, it made me kind of want to delve into it more to gain that understanding. So and I've mentioned this before on the trailer. I am a licensed professional counselor, but I'm also a licensed substance abuse treatment practitioner as well. So that's my arena. That's my arena. So something that is important for you to understand and know is actually what the brain is. So the brain is an organ, and it controls our mind, it controls our behaviors, and also our motor functioning, right? It controls all of that. So just like a person may, if a person has a stroke and their speech becomes slurred or their processing, they can't get out what they want to say. Why is that? Because of the hemisphere of the brain that it affected. Or a person's say their hand or their foot or something may be crooked or they can't walk or do these things. Why is that when they have a stroke? Because the brain has been affected. And we just have to kind of be aware of, you know, being open to learning and having that understanding. But when it comes to mental health, it's always that stigma there. We don't even think about that versus a stroke, right? So like I said, the brain is an organ and it controls our mind, behaviors, and motor functioning. Just like the heart is also an organ, right? And the heart pumps blood through our bodies and through our arteries. So the pancreas is also another organ. And it is actually the thing that controls our insulin levels. Okay, so it all these organs play a vital role in us living. Things that we don't think about. Our body is functioning and doing the different things to help us survive, right? So when the pancreas malfunctions, it causes dysfunction with our insulin levels. Okay, and that's where diabetes and all that comes into play, because either it's too much insulin or not enough, as far as the production of it. Now let's talk about when the heart malfunctions. So when that malfunctions now, it actually causes dysfunction in blood flow, but also breathing. This is where heart disease and all that comes from. Now check this out. It's no different, the brain from the heart and the pancreas and all these other organs. When the brain malfunctions, it causes mental health disorders. So we can't sit here and judge and stigmatize one disease from another disease. It's all across the board. It's all pathological. So we just need to be in tune and kind of be open to learning that. You know what I mean? So I'm hoping that today, that this will help to bring that clarity, and even that you want to even learn more. So let's talk about addiction. Let's go to another level. So what happens in addiction is it's a disease, and I'm going to keep saying that because I want you to drill that, because when you think of disease, you think sick. You think of dysfunction, you think of something malfunctioning, and I want you to get that, okay? So it is a disease that causes the brain to malfunction. Now, what happens is, and why it does that, is because the structures of the brain are damaged. Okay? So remember, the brain teaches us how to think, feel, and not teaches but controls how we think, what we feel, and what we do, how we behave, right? Don't you think that would be affected, if it's malfunction, if it's sick? Absolutely. And that is why people uh may be sweating, may be jittery, may not be able to sit down if they're anxious, um, because it affects those things, what we think, feel, and do. So the damage from addiction, this is what causes people to use drugs or drink, although there are negative consequences. Okay. So when people ask, why can't you stop? Or why do you keep doing this? Okay, then in all actuality, their brain is jacked up. Because not only, you know, have the substances and the alcohol and things of that nature eaten away at the brain and change the way that it is wired and communicates, but it also, it plays a role in cause and effect. What we normally look at as cause and effect, if I do this, this is going to happen. They don't have that. People that struggle with addiction, they don't have that when their brain is sick. And so just remember, the wiring, the actual wiring of the brain is jacked we call it hijack. It's hijack. So even the normal way of thinking, like a logical person may think, that person does not have the ability to do that. Okay. So know this: all drugs and alcohol are made of molecules, and these molecules that the drugs and alcohol are made of, they look just like the natural messenger molecules, right? So think of messenger molecules. These are also known as neurotransmitters. Okay, neurotransmitters are messengers. They communicate. They help us do some of the things that we do. If we want to pick something up, it that fast, within milliseconds, it does what it needs to do to communicate to pick something up. That's just how powerful this thing is. So in this brain of ours, and within the neurotransmitters, and I'm gonna call them the messenger molecules, okay? They activate and they trigger pathways that are in our brain, um, and communicate. But not only do they do that now, they also play a part in pleasure and motivation pathways. Okay. So these messenger molecules, these neurotransmitters, these things talk. They talk to our brain, and they play a part in what feels good to us, but also um what we do, the motivation aspect of it. So let me give you an example to break it down. Say if, Lord knows I love me some sweets, right? So like, well, more so ice cream. I like ice cream, cookies, chocolate sometimes, stuff like that. So say eating sweets and bread. Say if that's a person's guilty pleasure. I like bread too, by the way. If those items are a person's guilty pleasures, the same pleasure pathway that is activated when I'm eating my guilty pleasure, one of them hot cheddar red lobster bay biscuits, or some of Granny's or Aunt Pumpkin's cornbread, those things like that, right? When I take a bite of that, the pleasure pathway that is activated, that feeling that I feel where it's real good and I'm enjoying it, is the same pleasure pathway that is activated when a person takes a drug or drink, when they're addicted to it. Same pleasure. But even before they get addicted to it, is the pleasure there. And that person is always trying to chase that high or that intoxication. Although they will never get to that point again, the dysfunction is still trying to chase it. And that's what creates a tolerance, where they build more and more tolerance, and they take more of the drug or more of the drink, okay, which causes even more issues. So think about that. You think of something that you love, right? Now, there's also a thing as a cell phone addiction too, video gaming addiction. Now, I love video games, but I ain't that bad. But but just think of that thing that you enjoy and how you feel when you're enjoying it. Same thing with drugs and alcohol. It's the same pathway, right? And that's why we just can't judge, because and like I tell people, until you lace them shoes up and walk in them, you can't point a finger, right? You cannot. So then check this out. When a person is trying to stay away from like sweets, right? And they go to the checkout at the grocery store, what is right there in the aisle when they get ready to pay? Sweets, candy bars, all types of just good looking stuff. My mouth watering actually just thinking about me, Mr. Good Bar right now. But you know, that is right there. Do you know that just the sight of the candy, even when you're trying to do good, lights your brain up? It triggers it, it activates it. Because guess what? The memory of the pleasure that it gave you is what has you on high alert. So you begin to crave it. It's a trigger. Same thing, just like a drug and alcohol, you know? So it's similar, because we all have, you know, those same pleasure pathways that are activated, but just in different ways with different things. Now, if sweets and bread is not your thing, your kryptonite, could be sex. Same thing with that. So we all have different vices and different things that we need to be aware of and know how this thing affects us and what how the behavior happens that is birthed out of these dysfunctions. So the thing about um what happens within an addicted brain is dopamine. Okay, I'm sure many of y'all have heard of that. Dopamine is we can. It's also like called the feel good chemicals. Serotonin is also another feel good chemical, right? Um, so dopamine, we release that, right? We release it when we take that bite of that chocolate or the bite of that bread or that cornbread. It's released, um, and it just makes us feel real good. So when a person is using drugs or drinking, it our brain releases an abnormal amount of dopamine, okay? And it's to the point where it floods the brain. So much is released that our brains are not supposed to operate that way. And so that's what drives a person to want to chase that feeling again and engage in those addictive behaviors. Okay. Now, know this dopamine, which you remember, the feel good chemicals, they also drive learning, memory, um, motivation, and also pleasure. Okay. So let's take it to another level. So the brain is learned and remembers the feeling of some type of relief or some type of escape or some type of euphoria that has occurred, right? Which gives us pleasure. It remembers that. It remembers that time when a person may pick up that drug, that drink, have sex with somebody, eat that chocolate. It remembers that. And that is what motivates a person to keep repeating the dysfunctional behaviors. Okay. Because the brain, in a very fast way, reminds them of all this stuff, and so what happens is part in the brain. I'm not going to get real technical with all the clinical terms, but there's a part in the brain called the it's called the amygdala. And the amygdala is what is activated at the site of whatever your kryptonite is, the drug, the drink, even the paraphernalia, even watching a movie that has drug use or alcohol use, it lights up. And this is why I tell people, man, that are in recovery or trying to be sober, or in active addiction, hey, you have to be very cautious about what you entertain, you know, what you put in your spirit, what you listening to, what you watching, because your brain is lit up and you have no idea, you can't feel it lit up, and subconsciously, it will push us to want to do the things that we know that we have no business doing. The amygdala is also it is this is the same thing that deals with the fight, flight, run, freeze. Um, it is activated when for survival purposes. Emotion, it plays a part in emotion, aggression, and all of these things. This thing is very important in so many aspects of our life. It also protects us. It can trigger us, but it also protects us. Um, and the second thing that goes along with this is there is a portion of the brain, right, which is the largest portion, which is the frontal cortex. This is like where our forehead is. Okay. And this part of the brain is, they call this the executive thinking center. All right. This part is very important in addiction. All right. And just this is important for you to know anyway. So the frontal cortex helps us to make rational decisions. If I touch the stove, I'm gonna burn my hand if the stove is on. Simple things like that. That's what the frontal cortex does. Um, it helps us with what's right and what's wrong. It helps us with knowing the difference of those. It helps us, that's where our morals are, weighing out all consequences and making those logical decisions, all of that is operated by that frontal cortex. Now, check this. When people say, I don't understand how a person knows that if they pick up a drug or a drink, or if they pick up a burger or food, if they have a food addiction, they pick up a drug or drink, um, they know they're going to go back to jail. They know they're going to lose their children. They know that if they pick up that food, that they're at risk of going into cardiac arrest. What is wrong with you? How can you do that? Guess what? Because the frontal cortex is is severely damaged from addiction. It jacks it up. So what makes sense to us ain't gonna make sense to a person who is struggling with addiction, because we can logically think. We know that if we pick this up, where are we going? We know that if we have a drug free workplace and we decide to drink or whatever, we know there's a consequence gonna come with that. A person that struggles with addiction and they know they're gonna get a piss test, they still gonna pick it. They just do it impulsively. There's no thought, because that frontal cortex is eaten. It is like dismantled. It's just hijacked. It is not operating as it should. This is how people lose their lives, their loved ones, and everything, because the logic is gone. And that's why I tell people, separate the person from the behavior. It's two totally different things that's operating in that moment, that we have to be aware of. And so that area of the brain is eaten up, and it is just, now it is difficult to sit back and try to understand why does a person pick up in the first place when they know that these are the things that are at risk. And we're going to get into that because there's so much controversy about choice, the choice versus disease model and all of that. And those are things that we will continue to talk about as well. So what I call people that are struggling with addiction, I don't care if it's drugs, alcohol, food, sex, the walking dead, especially in this drug and alcohol realm. That's what I call them, the walking dead, because they're just operating. There's no rational thought. They're just literally thinking about survival. To them, survival is picking up that drug or that drink, because their brain is telling them you're going to die if you don't have this. Just think about a person being dope sick and they're throwing up and they're sick and they can't move and they're hurting and they're shaking and, they're literally sick, So it becomes where they need it to function. That's the difference. They need it to function. Their brain is telling them, if you don't get this, you're out of here. You're going to die. So that's how warped the brain actually, becomes because of addiction. So y'all, this stuff is, so serious. And this is why I really wanted to kind of come in here and lay this out for you guys and I hope this is helping to, bring some awareness if it's in your families and, working with clients that may struggle, people in neighborhoods, things of that nature. You definitely just need to be more aware of the seriousness of this. Now, let's talk, where does it come from? Okay, let's talk about that. So, multiple things, right? Genetics is one of the things of one of the places that it can come from in our bloodline. So genetics is our bloodline, what runs in our family. When you go to the doctor and the doctor say, okay, what did your mother have? Did your mother have high blood pressure? Who had cancer? Who had, depression? Who had anxiety? They ask that because they're trying to see what was in our bloodline, because there's a high possibility that we can also be diagnosed with the same thing, whether it's medical or mental health. Okay. Now, for addiction, genetics makes up 50% of the probability of a person becoming an addict. So if you have somebody in your family, especially a parent, a close relative that has struggled with addiction, there is a 50% chance, probability that you could also, struggle with that. There's a vulnerability there. So genetics means you're vulnerable. For instance, a person may pick up a drink when they lose somebody close to them, and they pick it up, and they use it to escape, to not feel in that moment, to not think in that moment. And before you know it, one time turns into two, two turns into three, um, and it just becomes more and more and more. That one time, it increases, and then it's a frequent thing. It's like it grabs a hold of you. When you're vulnerable to something, that means that if you take a chance to pick something up, it can grab a hold of you. And that's the difference why some people can pick up a drug or drink and not be addicted. And then you have somebody who does the same thing and pick it up, and the hooks are in. But I always say addiction slow walks you. It might not be right then where it's the hooks are so deep that he immediately keep going back and back and back. It slow walks you. It's a gradual increase. It's a gradual drive, a gradual motivation, to feel that feeling that you were experiencing when you picked up. Um, so I hope that brings some clarity with that. So genetics is a biggie. It's a biggie. The other thing is also the environment. The environment is a big thing, and I actually, I have a theory that I created that encompasses all this. That my goal is to have it published, but it breaks it down to the point where it makes so much sense. People don't understand the importance of the environment that a person grows up in and how it affects us. From parents to caregivers to the neighborhood. We don't know who our mentors were, role models. We don't know, and that's both positive and negative. Mentors, role models, parents, whatever we have around us, and that could play a part. So a part of the environment could be learned behavior. You saw your parents pick up and drink and use when they were stressed out or they wanted to party, or things felt great. You taking it in. You're taking it in. And I have a saying that a child is like wet concrete. Every experience that they experience, whether it's a negative experience, whether it's a positive one, is like you taking a stick and just etching in it. You're drawing in it. And what happens to wet concrete over time? It dries. It dries, and that child, as it evolves into a teenager and then into an adult, is left to understand, why they are the way they are, why they think the way they think, and why they do some of the things that they do. And a lot of that is from those markings that were left in childhood. And a lot of people don't really understand how serious childhood is, and as far as how it develops us and how it plays a part in our personalities and our choices and decisions. So learned behavior is real, you know. Um, that's just like a person seeing, their mother cuss out their father. They could be doing the same thing to their husband. Or their father cuss out their mother, put hands on. They could do the same thing to their wives. Learn behavior. That thing goes deep. It goes very deep. Being in a neighborhood that has, a lot of drugs or prostitution and things of that nature, you're seeing it, you're taking it in. It becomes a part of your culture, and it just makes a person more at risk and vulnerable to do those things. So environment is another thing. That's a biggie. Um, Life experiences is another major one that can um, make a person, or is makes a person more at risk of struggling with addiction. Life experiences is huge. Um, Everybody's got a story. We never know what everybody went through, and some of those life experiences may be trauma. Man, it's so many people that have experienced so much trauma that we don't even know because it's been kept a secret, because of the embarrassment or the shame, or the pulling the cover back on family secrets and all this craziness, and it's so twisted that many did not talk about it. Even back in the day, folks, it was a lot of abuse and molestation and rape and cheating, and I mean it was so much going on but it was kept quiet. People didn't have a voice; their voices were taken away, and trauma can you definitely see a high correlation of those that have dealt with trauma to those that have struggled with addiction as well. Um, what many people may not know is that trauma shapes the brain as well. It changes the how it communicates, the structures are damaged and everything just from the experiences that a person may have. Okay. So that could be why a soldier with PTSD may flip out, and display severe aggression um, when there's nothing threatening going on. It is why um, a young person may lash out and be very impulsive because of different things that they have experienced in their childhood or adolescence. Trauma changes the structure of the brain and how the brain operates. A lot of people did not know that. Domestic abuse. If you were a child and you saw, your parents putting hands on each other or whatever like that, um, or the molestation, the rape, the physical abuse, all that shaped the brain. It warped it as well. So it did not have the ability to develop in a healthy way that it needed to develop. Um, and that plays a major part in what drives some of the things that we all do, and what we make ourselves more open and vulnerable to. And lastly, another thing that is big is a lot of people, the majority actually, who struggle with addiction, that that actually started, right, that picked up a drink or picked up a drug um, in their childhood. I have worked with people that have started as early as six, 6, 7, 8. I've pretty much worked with many different people on different levels of their, um, in their addiction. And what happens is when that child takes a drink or a drug, and they begin using and drinking and drugging at an early age, and it don't have to be every day, but just consistently using it, it hinders the brain from developing in the way that it needs to develop. It stunts it. It stunts it. So right then and there, um, it's setting the person up for the risk of poor decisions, for addiction, for other things that have negative consequences. It's already setting that person up for that. Why? Right? Even if a person in adolescence, they pick up and use. So the brain is developing between age 21 and 25 is when the brain will be fully developed. 24, 25 is the max. So as a teenager, that's the most pivotal time where, it's really doing its thing and developing. And so that's why teenagers can do stupid things impulsively without thinking, because that processing ability to the level of an adult is not the same. That is why a person who passes away and you have a younger person, they don't really understand the process. They're trying to process it in their way, but they don't have the fully, they're not fully capable of the processing ability like an adult can with a healthy brain. So it's hindering that person before they start. And it's even harder to treat a person who began using and drinking at an earlier age. It's harder to treat. It is treatable, but it will definitely take some time, and that's where you'll see more relapses and things of that nature occur. So, everybody is different. Every brain is definitely different. And, sometimes we just have to have grace and do what we can to support, these folks, not enable. And that's a conversation for another day. Not that, because that does not help. That just really makes it worse. To baby and enable, that is definitely a no. And that's another conversation for another day. So this is pretty much, the gist of what addiction is. And here's the thing, it is treatable. Okay? That's the important thing to know. It is not curable, it is treatable. So a person can live in recovery and be free and abstinent of drugs and alcohol, food, gambling, sex, you name it. They can be free of that, and just continue to do what they need to do to take care of themselves. So how can it be treated? It can be treated um, through counseling. It can be treated with medication management. So there's something called MAT, medication assisted treatment, where that's like Vivitrol and Antabuse and things of that nature, of the medications that help reduce cravings and or will provide negative consequences if a person tried to use, where they can even be lethal and fatal. So those are reinforcers to help while that brain is healing. Now, the brain is powerful, man. It will regenerate. The cells will regenerate. It becomes healthier over time, though. It just takes time. Now, some brains are so damaged that they need mental health medication to help with processing and help for it to function appropriately. And that goes with it, because what happens is one will feed the other. If a person has a mental health disorder, and that can be driving the person to want to use. Like if a person has anxiety and they're nervous, on edge all the time, they may look for something to take that edge off. So they may want to take a drink in the social atmosphere. Um, so it's just so much. This topic is just so it's a wide range, of things that for us to talk about and touch on. So counseling, medication management, detox is a big one, where a person will be in a hospital for a few days to detox off the drugs. They'll be given medication to help with that process. You have rehabs, that can be um, 28 days to 90 to a year. So many different options. You just have to find the options that are best suitable and fitting for you, your pocket. Insurance does not cover all or everything. Some do. It depends. Um, and just having a great positive support system is big. And you hear people, places, things. It's like the common saying, but it's so true. Putting yourself around people that are healthy, whole, and working towards wonderful goals. That's who you need to be around. Going into places that where you would use, or where you would score, or where which is picking up drugs, or things of that nature, that can make a person relapse. So that person has to really reinvent their life, man, and be very strategic about where they're going, who they're talking to, who they hanging with. Because guess what? Their brain is so sensitive that the person must be cautious, because that amygdala that I talked about can light up. It can light up, and before you know it, that person can be picking up again. But you have to be intentional and not think that you're stronger than what you really are. That's the key. And just taking the time um, for yourself, if you are a person who struggles with addiction, and or taking time for, if you're a family member, or something like that, or a friend, give that person grace, not enabling them, and just being a positive support, not reminding them how many times they screwed up and things like that. They already beating themselves down, and they live in a pool of guilt and shame for a long time. And the last thing that people need is to be kicked while they're already down. Now there you can hold a person accountable now, while not enabling them by putting boundaries up. Conversation for another day, but those are those things that that have to be done. So that's pretty much that with treatment. NAAA, those work for some people. They also have a recovery group that is, I cannot think of the name of it right now, but um that they have steps, but it's more Christian based. So that's a different one. Now AANA, it's based on spirituality. They talk about a higher power. So you can have a different faiths or not have a faith and go and be around like people who are trying to get to a certain goal. So many options out there, way more now today than there's ever been. So I hope y'all that this has really helped to bring some clarity, some knowledge, an open heart and an open mind to understanding, addiction, the brain, people, personalities, life. I really hope that this helped to open some eyes. And we're going to actually have my husband come on for the next session. And we're going to be talking together about his journey, his story, and what he's learned through the process. And then we're going to also have our families come on and give their view. See, because addiction is a family disease. It's just not that one person. It affects the whole family and the family dynamic. So, hearing it from them. And also we're going to have my husband's sponsor on and just to give some insight and talk about his journey and his program. So this stuff is going to be pretty good. I'm really excited. I'm really excited about this. I was just itching to do this series, man. And it's just time. It's just been time. I was almost anxious. I was so excited to get this going. But I just really want you guys to just continue to support, spread the word, and just be a light, wherever you go, because you never know what a person is dealing with, and what they're carrying. We just never know. And it could be that kind word, it could be that smile that can keep a person going. We never know how many ticking time bombs we got around here, and um, who's suffering. Because a lot of people suffering, they're wearing a smile, and you would never know it. And that's why you have so many people that may commit suicide, and you never saw it coming because of the mask they wore, the smile. So, just be kind, y'all. Love people, be kind, and spread this word, y'all. Spread this word so we can get this out. And I thank you, love you guys, and we're out. Rap for Real Talk. Peace.